To get started here, to give credit where credit is due, much of the presentation today, not all of it certainly, but much of it, is based on the work that was done by Dr. Harold Kersner and published in his book on Project Management 2.0. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the presentation. And again, much of the presentation is from the book called Project Sponsorship by David West, a book I highly recommend to anyone who is either interested in understanding the role of the project sponsor, or perhaps more importantly, has the role of project sponsor and wants to understand more fully what that role means. Wendy, I'm very much struggling here getting this thing to move forward.
No problem. I can turn for you.
Okay. The agenda. First of all, why are we here? Why are we doing this presentation? What's the imperative? And we'll talk quite a bit about the important role of the project sponsor in ensuring the success of any project. We'll talk very briefly about the project life cycle stages, with which I'm sure all of you are very familiar. But then we'll get into more detail about the roles and responsibilities of the project sponsor, and then specifically the sponsor's role and responsibilities during project governance, which is project selection, project planning, project execution, and then finally, briefly, project closure. And I'll have some closing thoughts at the end. And we will make a copy of this presentation available to anyone who wants a PDF copy. And I've included at the end of the presentation several sources, both books as well as internet links that I think would be of value to you. Okay, Wendy. What I would like, this is an extremely important topic, so much so that I have actually put together and teach a 2-day class at Lehigh University. It's a certificate program in their executive education program, specifically on project sponsorship. This is in recognition of the fact that, to the best of my knowledge, there are very few courses available that help executives, senior directors and vice presidents in particular, understand fully the role and importance of that role in project sponsorship. So what I have done for this presentation is I have taken 2 days worth of content and compressed it down to 45 minutes. If any of you would like to learn more about project sponsorship, either by attending the lecture at Lehigh or the program at Lehigh, or having us bring that program to your company, we would certainly be happy to do so. Wendy, next slide. This is just a brief synopsis of the program. Next slide, please. This presentation over the next 45 minutes is also one of an 8-course package that we have put together at Computer Aid that we call PM+. It's based on the work that Dr. Kersner has done in defining Project Management 2.0, which is in response to concerns about the poor success rate of projects in terms of actually delivering effectively the business value for which the project was first justified. And so again, this is one of a series of 8 courses, 8 presentations. And if any of you are interested in learning more about PM 2.0 and specifically having us present that to you, again, please feel free to contact me. My contact information will be at the end of the presentation. Wendy? This is just a brief synopsis of the PM Plus workshops. Next slide. And here is a list of the 8 presentations. And again, we can talk about that in more detail. This presentation is really one of an element of project governance as well as an element of project leadership. Okay? So why are we here? Next slide. It is true that the only way that a company or an institution or an organization can survive is by changing, is by evolving, by growing. And the only way that growth occurs, the only way that change occurs is through projects. And as it says here, by reinventing project management, the next untapped candidate for significant improvement in a company's pursuit of competitiveness is the project activity of the organization. So what we're trying to do is ensure that when you start a project, a project that is fully justified in the sense that it supports the strategic objectives of the organization, that project is successful. And by success, we mean that it actually delivers the business value for which the project was justified. Wendy? This, I think, is an extremely important quotation. By 2025, senior leaders and managers will spend at least 60% of their time selecting, prioritizing, and overseeing the execution of projects. In the very near future, much of the role of managers and executives will involve overseeing projects. And unfortunately, again, to the best of our knowledge, there's very little education available for senior managers, for executives, in terms of understanding exactly what that means. And since 60% of their time is going to be spent doing this, it's really incumbent on all of us to ensure that we provide them with a clear understanding of what their role is. Wendy? Now, unfortunately, and I don't think this is going to come as a real shock to many of you, only 38% of projects finish on time within budget and actually deliver the business intent. So despite all of the money that we have spent on project management tools, despite all of the time we have invested in project management training, we're not getting a whole lot better. And that really was the inception, or is the inception of PM 2.0, to address some of the limitations and concerns and issues of traditional project management. But that's another subject for a different time. This is a very, very compelling slide. Computer Aid, in association with the University of North Texas, undertook a study to evaluate the root cause of hundreds of project failures. And I ask you to look at the very top line here. The number one reason that projects fail to meet expectations and deliver business value is because a lack of top management support or commitment to the project. Now, this does not suggest that managers are incompetent or stupid in any way. It simply means that they have not been educated, they haven't been trained in terms of what that responsibility is. And so that's why we're here today. So, in the next slide. In addition to the listing the top 53 root causes of project failure, we've also taken the next step of categorizing these root causes into what are referred to as the deadly dozen. And there are people-related risks and process-related risks. And again, lack of top management support comes out as number one. Now, you've got to be very careful when you show this to people, because managers don't like to be told that they're responsible for projects failing to deliver as expected. And I've run into this myself on more than one occasion. But nevertheless, it is true. As you'll see as we go through this presentation, the role of project sponsor is not, as many executives believe, simply attending status meetings and signing checks. It's a much more hands-on, much more involved, much more time-consuming responsibility, as we'll see. Okay, let's briefly go through the project life cycle stages. This will be a review for many of you. The simplistic view is that we think about a project, we plan it, we execute it or do it, we deliver the business value to the organization, we reap or derive the benefit, and then we think about what the next project should be. That's the very simplistic view. Next one. In a little more detail, the project life cycle, from initiation through planning, through execution, monitoring and control, and closeout. And it turns out that there is a significant responsibility of the project sponsor in each one of these stages of any project. And we'll talk about that as we go through. Wendy? Okay, in a little more detail, the 5 phases. Obviously, initiating the project presumes, first of all, that the project has been appropriately chosen. And we'll spend quite a bit of time on governance, because that really is where the project sponsor is really most involved. Then through project